Okay, we're good.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the Boarding School 360 webinar and panel. My name is Kelly Sheehan. I work in the Pomfret School Admissions Office, but I also help Tori Dodge, who is the founder of Schools to Know, with event planning. Tori has been creating boarding school fairs and working with families on Bermuda for about 27 years. And we did not want to stop her amazing streak. And we knew the only way to bring schools to Bermudians and other people around the world was virtually. So this event is new for Schools to Know, and we really are delighted to be partnering with Garrett Educational Consulting. Katie has been involved in educational consulting for over 20 years. Katie and her business partner, Martha Ann, created Boarding School 360, and we are thrilled to be able to help boarding schools and families connect. So enjoy.
So Garrett Educational Consulting and Schools to Know present Boarding School 360. During this webinar, you will learn more about boarding school communities and the experiences they provide for their students and families. Admissions professionals from a range of schools will be on the panel to talk about the incredible opportunities boarding schools provide, as well as answer all of your questions. The topics we will cover will include residential life and advising, academic day, benefits of boarding school, financial aid, extracurriculars, junior boarding schools, and single gender education. This webinar is to give a general overview of the boarding schools so that the panelists will not be speaking about their particular schools. We would encourage you to consider participating in the over 56 schools and counting who are participating in our individual Zoom rooms that we have over the next 2 Thursdays and Saturdays to learn more about each of these schools. The 15-minute Zoom room meetings will give the admissions reps the opportunity to tell you more about their particular schools and answer any questions that you might have. It's really meant to be an informative and casual conversation, so there's no need to do anything to prepare. It's a great opportunity to learn more about some of the schools you are already familiar with, while also learning about some schools that you might not be as familiar with. We'll go over more about the details of the fair at the end of tonight, just to give you some more specifics about that. So at this time, I would like to have the panelists introduce themselves and tell a bit about each of their schools. Jane, we will start with Groton.
Good evening, and thank you, Katie and Kelly. My name is Jane Santinelli. I'm one of the admission counselors at Groton School. Groton is a primarily boarding school, 35 miles northwest of Boston. We are co-ed. We have a small 8th grade program, which is rather unique, but the predominance of our program is a high school program, 9 through 12. Groton students come from all over the United States and all over the world. The school was founded in 1884 and has continued to this day. We are known as a hallmark in terms of academics and a rich program, like all of the rest of our peer schools.
Hi, my name is Heather Eckert. I am Assistant Head of School for Enrollment Management and Director of Admissions at Indian Mountain School, which is a pre-K through 9 school located in Northwest Connecticut. We are one of 10 junior boarding schools. So we have boarding students from 5th through 9th grade. So many of them come to prepare for the secondary schools that are on this call. We have an enrollment of just under 300, and we are located just south of the Berkshires, but 2 hours north of New York City. And we are right down the road from Hotchkiss, Berkshire, Millbrook, Salisbury School, and then several other boarding schools in Connecticut are just 30 to 40 minutes away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Will Richardson. I'm the Dean of Admission at the Lawrenceville School. We are located in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, which is about 5 miles from Princeton. We're halfway between New York and Philadelphia, so a little more urban, suburban setting. We are a co-ed boarding school of 815 students.
Hi, I'm Zach Swope, Senior Associate Director of Admission at Mercersburg Academy, which is co-ed boarding high school, grades 9 through 12, and postgraduate. We have 440 students, and students from all over the country, all over the world. Founded in 1893. Trying to think of something interesting so all of our details don't run together. We've graduated 54 Olympians, which is a pretty cool claim to fame. But yeah, excited to be here and to answer questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Graham. I'm the Director of Enrollment Management at Pomfret School in Pomfret, Connecticut. We are located in northeast Connecticut, fondly referred to as the Quiet Corner. We're about 45 minutes from Providence and Hartford, and a little over an hour from Boston. We are a school of 350, 85% of our students board, and we serve grades 9 through 12 and postgraduate.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Burgess. I'm Director of Admissions Marketing at Tabor Academy in Marion, Massachusetts. We are located about an hour south of Boston and about 20 minutes from Cape Cod, which is a distinct feature of Tabor. Our campus includes about a half mile of coastline and a marine science center right on the water. We enroll 540 students from around 20 states and 20 countries each year. About 70% of our campus is boarding. And I'm looking forward to speaking and answering questions.
Hello, I'm Jesse Downs, and I'm the Director of Enrollment Management at St. Timothy's School in Stevenson, Maryland. We are 20 minutes from the Inner Harbor in Baltimore and an hour from DC. On 145 acres where we have 150 girls. We're an all girls, primarily boarding and some day school, about 70% boarding and about 30% day, and committed to empowering young women to live fearless lives. And if you come to our campus, you'll see the fearless girl that is one of 5 in the world that you may be familiar with from New York.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm JP Burlington, Director of Admission at Trinity-Pawling School. Founded in 1907, we are about 65 miles north of New York City. We are an all-boys school with just under 300 students. And our students start either, we have a day program that starts 7th grade through 12th grade. We also have boarding 8th through 12 and PG as well. And we are a campus of about 230 acres where the boys get to be boys and play outside and utilize the great campus that we have. So looking forward to tonight, and thanks again for joining us.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Nurk Eldosov. I am the Vice Consul at the U.S. Consulate here in Bermuda. And I'm primarily here to help answer any questions related to student visas or any requirements that the students may need to travel internationally to get to the United States to attend one of these schools. So if you have any questions about student visas, please feel free to ask.
Thank you so much to all our panelists for being here. We're so excited to have you and for you guys to be able to share more with the attendees about boarding school and all that boarding school has to offer. So we would like to start with talking about residential life and advising. And to do that, we're going to have Amy from Pomfret.
Thanks, Katie. When you think about boarding school, the cornerstone of a boarding experience is living on campus. And within the residential life program, each and every student gets to develop deep relationships with their peers, but also with faculty. At most every boarding school, the faculty members live on campus with their families and are fully engaged in the life of the school. When I talk to families about the benefits of living where you go to school, I think a couple things come to mind: structure, support, and supervision. When you think about the structure of the day, there's a nice rhythm when you're getting up, heading to breakfast, off to class, having your sports and activities, having a structured study hall at night, consistent lights out. Oftentimes families are concerned about losing the quantity of time with their child, but in many ways you'll gain back some quality when you think about it. Right now, if your child's at a day school, or you may be running them off to practice, making sure they have access to their extracurriculars. Boarding school provides a one-stop shop and really allows that child to find, in many ways, more time in their day than they might normally have. When you think about connecting, whether it be with faculty members or fellow students, the way the day is structured, there is typically built-in time in the day to find extra help, to connect with your peers. We structure downtime for the kids. Oftentimes there's a longer lunch. There's time in the evening time to spend time with friends. When you think about activities, the fun part of school, being at a boarding school allows a student, in many cases, to just step outside of their room, to have access to dances and lip sync contests and poetry slams and fun things both on campus and also access to opportunities in the broader community. If they're close to a major city, maybe that's going into for shows or sporting events, things like that. So allowing students this hub of activity and access is a real benefit of boarding school. Thinking about finding that support. Sending a child to boarding school is not like sending them to college. They are not on their own. They have peers and faculty members looking out for them. In most residential settings, there's something called a prefect, or it might be called a proctor. That's a peer leader in the dormitory, there to support your child as they navigate the normal ups and downs of being away from home. Roommate challenges, but also there to celebrate the successes and the birthdays and the milestones. So there's a cheering squad. And your advisor is that lead cheerleader in many ways. At every school, and it's defined differently, but the advisor is your point person, is that one faculty member that is going to really get to know your child and keep an eye on them, how they're doing socially, emotionally, and academically. They are going to be the pipeline of information for you. And trust me, we're able to fill in the blanks. You know, if you have a child that's really chatty and tells you everything that's going on, that's great. But more often than not, you know, you might ask your child, how's things going? Good. Classes? Going well. You know, the advisor's there to fill in the blanks. You know, I saw Johnny on the soccer field today. He seems to be really hitting his stride. I've seen him in the dining hall with his friends. Seems to be making close friends. We caught that he didn't hand in his homework in math class, and we're putting some support around that. So they're the eyes and ears for families. And so I think, you know, the combination of the two, the caring adults, the opportunity to build deep and meaningful relationships with peers are really some of the hallmarks of boarding school and what make our residential and our advising programs so special.
Thank you, Amy. And I just want to encourage anyone, if you have questions about some of the topics that are being covered, go ahead and put those. You can put them in the chat box as we go, and then we will circle back to the panelists about answering those questions as well. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat box. Okay, so next we are going to cover the academic day, and that is going to be by Jane Santinelli from Groton.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome to everyone. Amy spoke how important those relationships with students and teachers are in boarding schools, and that teacher relationship is key to your academic experience. Your teachers will know you well and you will know them well. As she said, you will live alongside and with them, and not only will they be your teachers, but they'll be your coaches, and they may be your advisor, and they might live in your dorm and be the head of your dorm. So those teachers will understand you and you will get to know them really well. The academic day is usually consists of both your typical core classes, so the classes you're familiar with, math, science, English, a foreign language, history. And they will also include elective classes. And those electives could be in the arts, it could be music or theater or in studio arts. They also might be electives within the academic program. And those electives are typically offered for older students who have already had the basics or had some of the prerequisites for those classes. Those classes may include a specialization in English and Moby Dick, or a science elective in astronomy, or a history elective on the court and the Constitution, for example. Some of the classes could have an experiential component. Environmental science is something that lends itself to exploring outdoors. So you may have some kind of an experiential study or work that goes along with that. And each of the schools often will have a signature program as well. So for example, the school that I work at has a program called a tutorial, where seniors who are in high school can design and study their own topic that they are particularly interested in. I was on a student information session earlier this week with a student who has designed a class for the spring, a tutorial called The Physics of Sports. He's going to be studying how physics is related to athletes' performance. So those are opportunities. Many schools offer experiential programs abroad. You may be studying abroad with students either academically or with some kind of an arts program. So you might be traveling with a music ensemble or with a choir, for example. And then some of the schools have summer programs also, summer programs that can help you prepare for high school, or summer programs that might help you to resolve an achievement gap that you've experienced, for a preparation gap, because you haven't had the opportunities to study certain topics as well as perhaps you would like to. But each of these opportunities, you'll have these relationships with teachers you know. The other hallmark of boarding schools is that typically your classes are really small. So typically there are maybe a dozen students in the class, and you often sit around a table, sometimes called the Harkness table, and participate in the classroom. So it's very rare that you'll have a teacher standing up and lecturing you. It's more often the case that you'll be participating in the classroom discussion and being part of the learning experience. And that, I think, is the bulk of the information that I want to share about the academic program. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, so now we will have Will Richardson from Lawrenceville talk about the big question of why boarding school.
$1 million question, as I like to call it. And Amy and Jane are so good at their jobs that they have covered some of what I was going to cover. So I'm not going to repeat, but I do want to elaborate on some of the things they said. And I want you to think about this for a second. Imagine going to a school where you're surrounded by kids from all over the world who love to learn. Imagine going to a school where kids are nothing like you, but they're exactly like you, where kids are not from the same place, but they're heading towards similar places. Imagine a school where the opportunities are nearly endless. That is the tip of the iceberg when thinking about boarding school, and that's what frames the way I look at the overall benefits. Being in a residential community, it changes your life in so many unique ways. And the two, for me, the two benefits that jump out first are what we have mentioned already. One, the value of time, and the fact that a boarding school is a one-stop shop, and you're going into high school, you don't have enough time. It is not fair. And boarding school allows you to think in ands instead of ors. And that changes the way you approach things. And then relationships has been highlighted already. I've been to boarding school, college, grad school, boarding school. They are deep relationships, both with your peers and your teachers. A personal story, my boarding school friends are still my best friends, and we still have a text chain that we talk about those goofy memories when we were teenagers. Fun fact, one of my best friends in boarding school is now my brother-in-law. That's a different story for a different time. My advisor in boarding school reached out to me about an opportunity to work at my alma mater, and that's where my educational career started. So people who truly believe in you, and they are going to they're going to challenge you. they're going to stretch you, but they're also going to support you. You're going to work hard at boarding school, but you're also going to play hard, and you're going to have some fun along the way. I think it's important, it was mentioned before, that people know who you are in all aspects of your life. They see you at your best. They see you at your worst. And again, they're there to help you reach your goals. And high school and boarding school specifically, it's a transformative time, both inside and outside the classroom. And having the time, having the relationships to support you, having a blank canvas ahead of you, that's what makes boarding school so special and allows you to truly discover yourself. It allows you to find your passions academically, athletically, artistically. You are a true triple threat on our campus, and you're expected to engage in all school, in all aspects of school life. And that means you get to try things you never thought you would try before. That means who you are when you enter high school is sometimes different than who you are when you leave, and you find your voice, you find your passions, and you fill that canvas over whether it's 4, 3, 2, 1 years, but you leave our schools full, and you are ready for college, and that is a huge difference with boarding school graduates. You get to college, your transition is pretty seamless. You know what it's like to live away from home. You understand what it's like to write a research paper and crank out work that is pretty significant and expects a lot out of you, and it just allows you to really, it allows you to dive into college much quicker, and all of us on this panel, I'm sure, have received similar calls from our graduates who say, I really miss school X. I really miss our school. I really miss the people, but I am ready for college. And that is a huge benefit of the boarding school experience.
Thank you all. Okay, so Zach from Mercersburg. Let's have you speak on financial aid and merit aid for boarding schools.
Absolutely. And if only I could, well, I guess I could take my headphones out, but there's a great example of boarding school life going on right outside my door, which is my wife and I live in the dorm, and I can hear the music playing, kids coming back from grabbing dinner, and a lot of loud stomping. So if I seem a little bit distracted in moments, that's all it is. But it comes with the territory. It's part of life at boarding school. As far as financial aid, it can be. I think Will and Jane and Amy spoke so eloquently and engagingly about boarding school life. I don't want to be a wet blanket and get mired down or bogged down in the details of financial aid. So I'm going to just paint very broad strokes because it can become it's an incredibly personal process to each family. It's individual for each family. Everybody's situation is different. So for specific details, it's probably best to speak with individual schools, just because situations can vary so dramatically. But I would say first and foremost, we all have financial aid. Obviously, it exists. It's incredibly important to each of our schools' ability to function and the type of students that we have here, and it's an important tool for us to be able to enroll students who are the right fit, for us to continue to build the types of communities that we have and to maintain the communities that those students want, both in terms of the quality of the students and the programming and everything that you have available to you, and so many other things. There is basically need-based aid and merit-based aid. Need-based, I would say, it's safe to say, is by far the most common type of financial aid. Not all schools have merit-based aid. I know we have a couple of merit-based scholarships. I'm not sure how much that may vary among the schools here, but it just depends. And I think and there's obviously the financial aid process is separate for us at least, I think that's pretty much universal. It's a separate process from the application itself. Ours runs through a different system. There are only a couple out there, so for the most part, one financial aid application can be applied to all the schools that you're considering. And I think one big piece of advice I would say is do not be afraid to ask about it. It's not a bad word. It's a topic we are all more than happy to engage in and discuss. It does not affect, how your file or application is viewed, or your students' qualifications or candidacy. So do not be afraid to engage in conversations and ask the schools that you're interested in questions about what their philosophies are, how aid is used, how it's determined. They will go through it in great detail with you and explain it to the nth degree. I think and don't be afraid to engage in that conversation early. I think it's better the more you know on the front end, the easier it makes decisions on the back end. And I know it's a little vague. Please, any of my colleagues, do not hesitate to fill in the gaps if I'm missing any big pieces. I won't be offended or feel like you're stepping on my toes by any means.
Thank you, Zach. Okay. Does anyone else want to jump in on that, or we can take that with questions if you guys have anything further with to do with financial aid. So we are going to cover now extracurriculars, and Laura from Tabor is going to help us learn more about that.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Thanks, Kelly. So this is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about. These opportunities are going to be some of the most fun times that you will have at boarding school, but make no mistake about it, they are also incredible learning opportunities. If I had to guess, I would bet that Mr. Richardson from Lawrenceville's group chat that he has with his boarding school friends, that he met many of them in his extracurriculars. Yep, I see a nod. So these are the memories that you will have with you long after you graduate, and these will be a lot of your lifelong friends. Extracurriculars or co-curriculars, you'll hear them called different things at different schools, but they're essentially the same. I think extracurricular is probably a word you may be familiar with, but we often call them co-curriculars because they really are part of the curriculum. They go along, they are co-partners with the academic program and the residential life program at our schools. So the best part about it is that the co-curricular program will teach you a lot of the life skills that boarding schools are very proud to claim that we teach. And you'll have no idea that you're learning those things while you're learning them. You'll just be having the best time ever. Many of you may be considering boarding school because you've heard that there's a strength in certain co-curricular programs, perhaps athletics or performing arts at boarding schools, and that's certainly very true. We hope that you will come to our schools and share your talents that you have. I think that the talent that our students share with us through the co-curricular program are some of the greatest gifts that a student could share with their community, and some of the best experiences. But at the same time, we hope you won't only do activities that you already know how to do. We hope you'll come to our schools and try something that you never thought you would try before. We have a thing called squash at a lot of these boarding schools, and it's a sport, not a vegetable. And it's a great deal of fun, and it's really hard and very addicting and very fun. And that's just one example of a lot of fabulous things. And a lot of times a boarding school community allows a student who has really only seen themselves in one way in terms of their co-curriculars before, may see themselves in a whole new light. Most of our schools require a balance of some kind of participation in things that are more active, and then things maybe more like arts, visual and performing arts. So you're sort of, by nature of what we require, you will get a chance to try a lot of different things, and you might start to see yourself in a new way. And that's a wonderful thing. You can still see yourself if you come into boarding school seeing yourself as an athlete, you can still see yourself that way, but you might also see yourself as an artist now. or the other way around. The other thing, I've heard so many stories over the years in boarding schools about students who have been sort of typecast by their peers at a public school or even an independent day school based on their extracurricular activities. And they maybe, the social environment at their school hasn't really made it comfortable before for them to admit that they actually like other things too. And I think that boarding schools are a place where students can break free from that and actually fully own all of the things that they're interested in and be proud of it and find lots of kindred spirits and peers who are finding the same things. And I think that's awesome. Most boarding schools will offer students the chance to participate in 3 sort of major co-curricular activities. I like to call them sort of your primary co-curricular, and that's something that you're going to do every day after school for a season, fall, winter, and spring. And most boarding schools will have on their website a list somewhere of all the different choices that you have in those different seasons. And then also the requirements. There are some boarding schools that require you to participate in something athletic and interscholastic athletic competition a certain number of times per year. Other schools just require that you do things that are active and moving 2 of the 3 seasons or something like that. Each school is going to have something a little bit different. So it's really important to check that out and make sure you know what the expectations are and what the requirements are, and see if that fits with what you see for yourself at boarding school. But then a lot of schools will also have, or all of our schools will have sort of a secondary co-curricular program, which might be an informal club or community service or something like that that you'll participate in, maybe 1 or 2 times a week or 3 times a month or something like that. A little bit less formal, but still very impactful. A chance to kind of do something a little bit different. Some schools will have different ways that they allow students to mix and match different interests that they might have. So it's a good idea to look at the different schools that you're interested in and see how you would be able to, for example, balance arts and athletics. Maybe if you want to do, if you're interested in a particular art, but you really like to play a certain sport, you might want to find out if there's a chance for you to be taking an art class during the academic day, during the season that your main sport is taking place, that kind of thing. Find out, is it possible to be involved in drama and sports at the same time? What about volunteering? Is that something you could do every day if you wanted to? So just kind of finding out how each of the different schools structure those different opportunities. Some schools may classify things like yearbook and newspaper as primary co-curriculars, something you're going to do every day, whereas some schools might classify that as more of like a secondary, something you're going to do once a week or 2 or 3 times a month, something like that. So it's important to, if you have certain things that you're really passionate about and things that you really want to participate in, it's good to know how that would look for you at all the different schools that you're interested in, just so you know what's available. I think it's really fun to talk with students about how they could potentially mix and match all the things that they like to do. So that's a great topic to discuss with your interviewer. If you'd like to, you might get a general sense from the website, and hopefully you will, but your interviewer can help kind of bring it to life a little bit more. Also a question for a tour guide, perhaps. So I think those are some of the points that I think are important. The last one would be for students who really do have a pretty serious level of prowess in a particular activity. It's a good idea to find out how your level matches with the programs at the school. If it's something that you are going to want to be able to do every single day, or play, if it's a varsity team, if your hope is that you will play in every single varsity game, you might want to have an honest conversation with the coach. Is that going to match? Is that going to be a good fit? There might be some schools where you would play every single game and the coach could give you a good sense of that, and some schools where it might be a little bit more difficult, and you might find yourself like maybe needing to wait till sophomore year or junior year before you're making varsity games on a regular basis. So that's a kind of a good question to address if there's something that you're serious about. Likewise, if you just want to try a lot of new stuff, it's a good idea to find out what the expectations would be and what the time commitment would be for the junior varsity programs. If there's thirds, which is a lot of schools will have a varsity level of a sport, a JV level, which is often like not quite ready for varsity, but headed that way maybe. And then a thirds level, which is really like recreational or brand new. So it's a good idea to find out about what the time commitments are for those programs and things like that. So, so I think those are some of the topics that I think are important to keep in mind as you approach this. And again, there's a lot of different nuances to the way the programs work at different schools. So hopefully you'll be able to get a lot of good information specific to the schools that you are interested in. So thank you very much again, and look forward to answering any further questions.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about the junior boarding school perspective from Heather at Indian Mountain.
Thank you, Katie and Kelly, for organizing this evening. Having worked at boarding high schools and international schools for over 15 years, I think that there are many families that just don't know that junior boarding schools even exist. I cannot tell you how many families sit in our waiting room after going on tour with our students and come back and are so impressed. They say, how can our children become X and Y, you know, Sam and Louisa, who just walked us around campus, and this is such a hidden gem. I think oftentimes the middle school years can be somewhat tumultuous for some students, and at junior boarding school, you are with faculty that are really experts in middle school education in a 24-hour learning environment. So much of what everyone has already said, the whole child focusing on their passions, exploring new interests, really getting them excited about what they're learning. And it is a place where it is cool to be smart. It's, you know, it's where students really want to learn, but learning takes a different approach for everyone. So at the 10 junior boarding schools that exist in the United States, it really is a personalized academic approach. At our schools, we have students that are really ready for the top boarding schools tomorrow. We have some students that might need more academic structure. We have some students that might need help with executive functioning, organization, a particular subject area, students that might be navigating and have dyslexia or other needs as well. And so we're really a place where you can find your niche and you can find support for you no matter where you are academically, and to prepare you for that next step for secondary school. I always love to talk about the balance, and many of us have touched on this already on this call, but just the access to different activities and the balance of extracurricular. I had a family with twins, and they lived in New York City, and they wanted to play lacrosse, and they were interested in the arts, and they literally physically could not get to everything across town. I also had an advisee from Hawaii, and she came to IMS because she was a super soccer player, and she was interested in coding and engineering, and she really did not have the ability to do all of that and keep on top of her studies. And so the fact that, like others have talked about, you have that built into your academic day where you have these incredible elective offerings, robotics, math team, you know, Olympic curling we offer as one of our selections for a week before spring break. How many places can you do that? But having these really incredible opportunities to try new things, because at boarding high schools and middle schools is really when you should be exploring those new passions and doing something not because you're not afraid to try, but selecting things because you've already done that and you're really learning what you're most interested in, so you can really tailor your high school and then college experience. I also love to talk about how it is independence. You know, I think quite often students that have been away to summer camp or a summer program and they come back and they love it, and they are with students from all around the US or the world, and they say, how can I do this but have academics on top of it? That really is what junior boarding is like. It is much like summer camp or summer program, but obviously year round. And so students that have had those experiences and done really, really well thrive. And honestly, it's within an hour, they are off with so many new friends, and we are the ones that are reminding them that they have to call home and let their parents know that they're okay. But there is a feeling, we did a strategic planning process at my school, my second year at IMS, and we had one of our graduates who actually just graduated from Choate on the committee, and he was talking about how, you know, he felt like he was doing everything on his own. And so it's sort of hidden structures within the junior boarding school schedule where they feel empowered, they feel like they can do it. But yes, there are many more check-ins. You know, they're not going back and forth to their dormitories by themselves during the school day. But I think that also lends itself to the closeness of the environment, and particularly boarding and day students, when they wake up, have breakfast, and then they're with their friends from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. And some may sleep at home and do their homework at home. But otherwise, they're all in it together, and they get to really bond and know people from all over the world. The other piece that really struck me, there are two other pieces. When I worked at Hotchkiss and Blair Academy and a few other schools before that, I really wasn't sure with my advisees when I first arrived to IMS what it was going to be like. And honestly, it was the same conversations that I was having with my 7th graders, with my 8th graders, with my 6th graders, developing those self-advocacy skills, learning how to ask for extra help, learning to seek your teacher out when you had a question. And when I was at Hotchkiss, I saw students who, you know, were top students, but they did not have those skills in terms of being comfortable navigating adults and those relationships. And so, you know, students that do have that junior boarding experience, they just hit the ground running and enter high school with additional layer and level of confidence that I think that really serves them well. And one of the other things that really struck me after my first few years in the junior boarding world was also that, you know, so much of what we focus on is the learning outside of the classroom. And yes, we want the kids to be academically challenged and supported, but also the character development piece and the leadership opportunities. So I was actually at an event where there was a student from Millbrook School speaking, and she was talking about her junior boarding days and how close she felt to her classmates. And one of the other points that she raised to a family that was inquiring was that she had leadership opportunities as an 8th grader and a 9th grader. And so in completing her college applications to Tisch at NYU, she was noting things that she had done as an 8th grader and 9th grader, and then as a senior in high school. And so, you know, having that additional opportunity to take on leadership roles and be mentors to younger children, you know, also I think informs how students are able to really transition and adjust and make a huge impact on their high school campuses when they're really ready for that next step.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Okay, so Jesse from St. Timothy's, you're on deck to talk about the all-girls perspective of single gender education from a girl's perspective.
Great, and thank you so much. And you know, I think that a lot of it really comes down to history and culture and outcomes. Those three things are what I really think about when I think about why an all-girls school. And for those of you who are going to continue to do your research and look at different opportunities, we're a part of the National Coalition of Girls Schools, and you'll find information about all girls schools at ncgs.org, and you'll be able to kind of look at a whole variety of different all girls schools. But when I think about history and think about culture, our history and culture is one that's been male centric. That has, you know, I think a lot of people now are learning about different types of privilege, and certainly our schools are an indication of certain types of privilege. But when we look at positions of power and we look at positions of leadership, you know, the story that girls and women have been told historically is to close your mouth, keep moving forward, and they've been silenced over time. And so you really have to think about the context within which we're teaching and learning. Oftentimes in education, they'll call that the hidden curriculum, or sometimes when you're structuring educational environments, maybe the third teacher. And so as we put together a culture that's really for girls, we're putting them into that position where everywhere they look, they see female leadership. Everywhere that they turn, when you look at a robotics team, or you look at the math team, or you look at the athletes, all of the examples of to which they aspire are girls and are women. Everybody's been speaking quite a bit about the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I've seen very often her quotation that there'll be enough women on the court when there are 9. Right? That's the experience that our girls get to have on a daily basis, and it really changes. When you go to a co-ed school that will tend to reflect social norms and sociocultural histories, what you find is, male privilege, you find male leadership, you find examples where girls are silenced, where they don't feel as confident, they don't feel as competent. And so even though girls have outperformed boys by just about every measure in just about every subject for decades now, they still feel inadequate in those environments by and large. And so really turning the tide, what it does is it makes it not even a question that girls can, not even a question that girls should. And so they really expand their sense of limits. So rather than living within a system of sociocultural limitations that have been handed down over generations, what they're doing is they're experiencing a place where those limits don't exist, and where they can then find where their guide rails are, where their limitations actually lie, by putting themselves in positions that would have been discouraged in many settings. So you look at that, and really it's history and it's culture, and that rolls over into how we teach in the classroom, where you'll see a very highly collaborative, a highly verbally engaging system of teaching and learning. And then as you look at, especially if you can go and look at some of the details and the numbers at ncgs.org, but you'll see that the outcomes are better in terms of confidence, in terms of the aspirations that girls leave all girls schools with. They aspire to and expect to lead, and you'll find that while it's what is it, 0.5% of students in the U.S. go to all girls schools. It's a very small number, yet the number of all girls school graduates who are in positions of leadership, whether it's artistic, political, corporate, community activism, those numbers are far, far greater than the number of all girls graduates. So if you really want to tip the scales in your daughter's favor, I would recommend at least looking at the idea of an all-girls school, because there are distinct advantages to doing so and to going through those programs. I can say a lot more about this, but I know that we've got lots of other questions to deal with as well.
Thank you, Jesse. That was great. Okay, so on the other end of the spectrum, we have JP, who's going to tell us more about the all-boys school education.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be able to talk about this, especially just because I'm a graduate of an all-boys school, 2 of them actually, and it obviously helped make me the person that I am, and I think a big reason for that is that an all-boys school, there are kind of 5 things that they're all boys schools, all over the world. And just like the Girls School Coalition, there's an international boys school coalition. And there's a lot of great information on their website to give you insight into why all boys. And I think one of them is that we understand and celebrate young men. And we value what it means to be a boy. Because, you know, we have 11, 12-year-old boys that are roaming the halls. And we want to celebrate and understand them. And an all boys school does that. We at all boys schools seek to build good men. And, you know, nothing is more important than building character. And I think at a lot of boys schools around the country and around the world, character is essential. And teaching them what it means to be a good young man. I think it's also something that boys schools do is that we obviously learn and develop differently. We on this call know that if we have boys as sons or cousins or whatever, there's girls grow at a different pace. They learn at a different pace. And, you know, it's an opportunity to be in a classroom with other boys learning at a similar pace and being able to, as I said before, just be a boy. And I think what a lot of boys schools do is their curriculum enables active learning, project-based learning. And so not only is there collaboration and communication, but, you know, as I said, schools are utilizing their campus to get boys outside, to have classes that are meeting all over campus. And I'm sure if you looked on the websites of many boys schools, you'll see classes happening in all aspects, in all areas of the campus. And that's, you know, we're teaching in ways that boys learn best. And that's everything that I just talked about by crafting a curriculum that's going to teach the boys in different ways. And I think another aspect of the all boys experience is just we're fostering a brotherhood and lifelong friendships. And, you know, I want to make sure that I think a benefit of my experience is I worked at an all girls school. I worked at a co-ed school. And I also worked obviously here at Trinity-Pawling. And everything I just mentioned, it's not to say that a co-ed school can't offer that for boys. There are great schools out there that can bring out the best in young men. But I think the opportunity to do that in an all boys environment is just unique. And you always hear that when Parents Weekend comes around, and you know the mom or maybe even the grandmother comes and says, "Oh my gosh, what have you done to my son?" And just that the growth that they make in 6 weeks is more so than they have in their entire life. And it's just because at boys' schools we know how to engage them, how to celebrate them, and how to give them everything that they need to be good young men. But as I said, and as Mr. Downs says, it's the right, you know, it's got to be the right fit. And as when I was at another girls' school, I said, just get it on your list. So as Mr. Downs said, it's just put a couple boys' schools on your list, put a couple of girls' schools on your list, and just see what that right fit is going to be for you. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, JP. Okay, so now Kelly and I are going to start going through some of the questions that we've either received in advance from participants and that maybe have come through the chat box. And I'm going to try to lob these to each of you, but obviously feel free, any of you, to jump in on an answer. So Laura, could you talk a little bit about the application process?
Absolutely. So the application process has a lot of different steps to it for sure, and each one of them something that we as a school find valuable. And most of us participate in one or more common application formats. And that means that you fill out one application and send it to a number of different schools. The application process, typically this is about the time when most people are starting. So you're right on schedule. Checking, this is the time where you want to, the first phase is sort of identifying schools that you might be interested in. This is a good time to look at different events that are happening like this, and then events that are hosted by specific schools that are more specific to the ones that you're interested in. And then sort of figuring out a little bit more about how you want to narrow your list down as you know, and how you want to shape your search for a school. The application process is going to consist, once you get to the phase where you decide which schools you want to apply to, there's going to be a biographical form, a series of essays, and then I would say that they're more sort of like multiple paragraph, extended paragraph kind of thing. We're not looking for 2 to 3 pages or anything, anything too serious as far as the essays, but we are looking for something that will tell us a little bit more about you. And of course, we're also looking to see what kinds of things you've been interested in and what kinds of things you like to do. And a lot of the essays will give you a chance to do that. We'll also be asking for your current grades and then at least 1 year of previous transcripts. Some schools will ask for 2. We'll also be asking for recommendations from teachers, a math teacher and an English teacher, and then either your principal or guidance counselor. Some schools will also ask for a recommendation from someone of your choice. Some schools may also ask for a writing sample. Some schools may require the SSAT. Many of us are not requiring the SSAT because of the unique circumstances this year for students applying for entry in the fall of 2021. It may not be necessary. Some schools may say, if you're able to take it and you'd like to submit the scores, we'll consider them. But we're not requiring, and I know many schools are not requiring. So that's another important piece, but you should, if you are deciding to take the SSAT and you'd like to know a little bit about how the scores are viewed, you know, you can call the schools that you're interested in and find out what their range of scores are and a little bit more about how the school uses the scores to evaluate applications. So those are some of the components. The last thing I would say about applications is that if you think about it, let's say you have 5 schools that you're considering sending an application to. Think about what would happen if you only got into one school. Look at each of the schools and say, if this is the school, if this was the only school I got into, would I want to go there? And if the answer to that question isn't yes, then you don't need to apply there. You know, and so I think that sometimes a student may feel like, oh, I should apply to that school. You know, all my friends are applying to that school, or, you know, everyone's told me I should apply to that school. If you don't feel it, and through this process, there'll be a lot of opportunities, and we're all working pretty hard this year to give you opportunities to get to know our schools in a different way. So I think that's a good general thing to keep in mind. You'll know, that's a good question to ask yourself before you hit submit. Just my recommendation. And I hope that answers some questions about the process. It is, it's involved. I don't want to say complicated, and I don't want to say it's challenging. I'll say it's involved, but hopefully it will also be a little bit of fun for you and your family as you go through figuring out, you know, what schools are interesting. It's a lot of fun to learn about different schools. Hopefully this has been fun. And hopefully you'll learn a lot about yourself during the process as well, because I think it's designed as much for that as it is for us to get to know you.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. So that kind of leads me to another question that maybe Amy, you could jump in and answer about how would you suggest that a student go about creating a school list?
Absolutely. I think both Laura and JP touched on it a little bit, but I think if you take a step back at first, I think the family, both individually and together, should really talk about priorities. What are you looking for out of this experience? What type of academic environment? What type of school culture are you looking for? What type of size do you think might suit your child? What role will extracurriculars play in that decision? And I say do it separately first, then come together, because I think many families might think everybody's going to be on the same page. And that's a great point for discussion. Where are the intersections and where is the disconnect? And do your research. Things like tonight's panel are perfect. Listen to JP and Jesse. I think every student should, at least in the research phase, put on a single-sex school. If you think you are destined for a small school, look at a really big school. Make sure you have the information to cross that off your list before you narrow. And as Laura said, the narrowing starts at the point of application. I think it's a great suggestion to think, if I were to get into this school, would I really want to go? You have to be able to say yes if you're going to hit submit. But I caution families to make a decision too early. You're making a school list to apply to, but you're not making the decision of where you go. You know, this process takes several months. Stay well informed, stay engaged throughout that process. Make a decision when you have a decision to make. So I think my best advice is widen the funnel at the top and start to narrow when there's a point to make a decision.
Great. That was a great answer, Amy. Thank you. Okay, so Jane, could you share a little bit about what a typical day looks like? Just a generalized run through.
Sure. Well, a day begins with waking up in your dorm, and you're going to be waking up and, you know, getting yourself ready for classes. Typically, your prefect or the proctor that someone mentioned is there to, at least when you start as an 8th or a 9th grader or in a junior boarding school as a younger student, is there to make sure that you're out of your dorm and on your way, and so that you can eat and get breakfast before your day starts, because, you know, we all need to fuel our brains as well as our bodies before we start the day. At some schools, they may have a tradition of a school meeting or a school chapel that begins the day, a community gathering that kicks off the day. And they may have another community gathering where they share some of the announcements or things that are happening that day or that week. And then you go off to class. And you typically have a few academic classes in the morning. You may have a break halfway through. At our school, we have a break halfway through the morning, and students can get a snack, and they can meet with their teachers. They can meet with other students or do a little studying. They finish up some more classes, and then students go to lunch. And so lunchtime is a great time to connect with friends and faculty members. You might have a standing lunch date with your advisor every week, because every student will have an advisor, and that's an important part of your experience at boarding school. You go back for more academic classes, or maybe you have a band practice or a music lesson, something in the arts center. And then after school, everyone usually participates in an after-school program, that co-curricular program that Laura spoke of in the previously. So you would participate in athletics or maybe in the theater as a rehearsals. You might be involved in community service. You might be involved in doing some training, or you might create your own after-school activity. Some schools, like the school that I work in, allow you to create your own after-school activity. So you might be interested in music composition, and so you do that, or Chinese calligraphy. So you create an opportunity for yourself to learn and to practice that. After sports, people are usually hungry again, back to the dining hall for dinner. That's an important part of the day. And obviously clean yourself up and get ready for the evening event. Schools typically you'll have a break around that time. You might have club meetings. There are a variety of clubs at all of these schools that you can participate in. And if you want to start a new club, that's usually a possibility as well. You then often have a structured study hall. So depending on the age that you are or the grade that you're in, you may have a study hall in a certain place on the campus, or you may be required to study in your dorm room. Or as you get older, you may have the flexibility to study anywhere on campus or in the library. Study halls range probably an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours. There's a teacher available to answer questions. So if you have the need, you have someone who is a resource for you. And then students get ready to kind of end the day. And at the end of the day, many schools will have little gatherings within their dorms or other traditions that they follow. And depending on, once again, the school that you're involved in and perhaps the age or the grade that you're in, you may have a specific lights out time. And typically as you get older, you gain more personal responsibility for that bedtime, and it's up to you to make sure that you take care of that yourself. I think early on, we try to instill really good habits in students so that they can take that responsibility on themselves as they grow older and then ultimately move on to college. So that's kind of a day in the life of boarding school.
Sounds perfect. I'm ready to go. But you brought up a good point about, responsibility and independence. So I'd love to have someone speak a little bit about how technology is handled in the boarding school world. So Will?
I can take that, Katie. Technology is everywhere. It is all around us, and that has changed dramatically. That's probably the biggest change over the past 20 years is how pervasive technology is in our society, and it's part of everyday life, and schools understand that. Different schools will have different policies, so it's important to consult each school that you're looking at to really dig into their technology policy and how it's integrated into student lives. Cell phones are not just cell phones anymore. They are calendars, they are organizers, they are alarm clocks. Some schools will tell you, leave the cell phone in your room. Some schools will tell you you can have it on you, but it can't be around in class or in school meeting. So schools are gonna handle that differently. But what I tell kids all the time is technology should not inhibit your ability to interact with your peers and your teachers. So when I'm walking down the path and a student is buried into their phone, I sort of step in front of them and they go, oh, I'm so sorry. And it just shows that let's face-to-face interaction is really important in our communities. And that's why you go to boarding school. In terms of how technology is handled in the classroom, there are smart boards all over our schools. There are state-of-the-art labs all over our schools. The maker spaces, the digital opportunities, they're weaved into all that we do. Some schools will have a one-to-one iPad program or laptop program, or just different ways that they install technology into the classroom. In terms of study hall, I know I advise ninth grade boys and ninth grade boys, they need that phone outside their room during study hall. So that's a rule. And as you get older, you get a little more responsibility. So, technology is everywhere. We understand that it can be, it's an amazing tool. It's really important to your success in our schools, but it should not inhibit the reason you're there, which is to develop relationships, which is to find yourself in a lot of different ways. You don't want technology to be a distraction. You want technology to be additive. And so that's the way I look at that.
Great, thank you all. So Heather, do you think you could speak a little bit about technology from like a junior boarding school perspective?
Sure, happy to. And it's something that we navigate on a daily basis. I think most of the junior boarding schools are in the same camp in terms of we want to educate the students and prepare them for the next step in boarding high school. but we also are realistic about what girls and boys are like at this age. So honestly, at IMS, and I think many of my colleagues would share the same thing at other junior boarding schools, we don't need them during the academic day. So many of our schools are one-to-one laptop programs, so they have their computers and they're good. Oftentimes it's the parents that we have to say, just don't text them, between 8 and 5. But from the time that they're up, throughout the school day, they do not have access to their cell phones. There are phones available in the hallways. If there's an emergency, there's always an adult, if they had a secondary school interview and they needed to FaceTime on their iPad, we could get them to a common room and an iPad or a computer, no problem. From 5 to 6, students have free time and they do have access to their phones. And then really from 6 to 8:15, we have dinner, assigned tables in the dining hall. And then from 6:45 to 8:15, they're in the room studying. For the younger students, we actually have, many of our schools have the students place their cell phones outside the hallway during study hours. We also have some students that prefer to study in the common room versus their dorm room. And then many high schools and junior boarding schools have an additional layer for study hall where they usually have supervised rooms where it's a smaller number of students with a faculty if there are just too many distractions in their room. And then from 8 to 8:45 for us, they do have downtime where they're hanging out, eating snacks usually, and on their phones watching videos with their friends in the common room. But we try to make sure that it's a group thing and not that we're concerned that a student is literally in their room buried by themselves. Same thing for video games. Our video games common rooms have consoles, so we try to make that a group activity as well. And then at 9 o'clock at night, everyone turns on their phone. They're charged in a charging station that just so happens to be locked from 9 at night until 5 p.m. the next day. We've also moved away from giving students their access the whole weekend because we really think that kids need a break. And to be honest, the first 2 weeks of our school year, the students don't have their cell phones at all. And I think at first it's that immediate, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to be able to do this? But it's been, for so many students, their favorite time of year because they're connecting, they're really getting to know new students without the push and pull of am I posting something or are my friends at home doing something that's cool that I'm missing? And so it's really helped students transition. And then on the weekends, we've moved to certain times that we call tech-free times. So kids may be out to dinner and maybe they put all of their cell phones in a pile, or there's a weekend activity that they can choose from and they don't have their cell phones the entire weekend. And we've found that both parents and students, that's been worked really well. Because I think for a lot of students, there's so much pressure with cell phones, and when they don't have them with them, it's almost a relief for them too. So I think that there is definitely more structure and supervision, and there's a lot of intentional training too. Like in our advisory, we might have a topic to talk about digital citizenship and how you use your cell phone and how do you present yourself online and who can access all of those things. And so those are conversations that's all part of the education of the students too.
Great.
They also have to register them with IT so that we know what they're doing.
Oh. Thank you, Heather. So I want to ask, I think I'm going to direct this towards Zach, but I believe that maybe it was Will talked about the students being the triple threat. So Zach, I wanted to ask you about relationships between faculty members and students, and how oftentimes those relationships are solidified because of the interdisciplinary nature of boarding school. So if you could talk a little bit about how those relationships are established and those deep connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I mean, everything that everyone said has rang to a large, but Will, I think it was you that you said your best friends today are still your boarding school friends, and a couple of my advisees from the past few years. They've come back to visit over the years, and they've in catching up, I'm asking them all about college and if they're meeting people and if they're enjoying it. And in the first couple months, they, and it's a small sample size, but take it for what it's worth. All these students were like, yeah, it's really good. College is great. I haven't found the people there that I found at Mercersburg. I just feel I don't have that same kind of connection. And which I think is true. I think high school is an incredibly difficult, but also just transformative time. And then when you're put in a setting like a boarding school where you're surrounded by your peers and your faculty members, and you go through so much together and you experience so many big life events together, and are challenged and forced into new, activities. Together, it's really for 4 years or longer, or an immunity, and your faculty members, your teachers, advisors, they are involved in so many parts of your life. I went to a private day school, K through 12. Both my parents worked there. I went there my whole life. And it was great. We lived on campus. I was as close to being a boarding student at a day school as you could be. I knew my teachers since I was 5, but when I ran into them in the grocery store, I was like, I do not know how to talk to you, because I think they ceased to exist to me as a student outside of school. I went home and they were no more. They didn't have a personal life. And then, so I didn't know how to really in conversation with them outside of talking or things at school. We lived together, and I was on duty last night in this dorm, and the conversations that we had just with kids that genuinely want to talk. They're just interested. They're curious about you. They want to discuss things. They want advice. They want to discuss school, sports, relationships, family life, everything in between. Be reassuring to where you can engage in those conversations with your peers and with trusted adults, as well as your parents. There's fairly well-known research that shows the most influential people outside of a student's life, aside from their parents, are their peers and their non-parental adults, especially in their teenage years. Those are the people that are going to have the biggest effects on them. And to have access to people like that, and to have them care about you and your character, and to have eyes on you, and to be personally invested in your development, is really special. So that's a long-winded way of I think, but it's there's just so much crossover, and emotionally, that there's so many people and kind of mentors that you can draw upon or lean on in times of need or celebration.
Perfect. Thank you, Zach. Okay, so I know this is a question that a lot of parents are wondering, maybe not the kids as much, but maybe Jesse, if you could talk a bit about health and wellness on campus.
Sure. Excuse me. And this is something that's extraordinarily important. I mean, we're in obviously a global pandemic, and people are worried not just about physical health, but mental health and social interaction, and how everything comes together, and everyone's really getting a deeper appreciation, I think, of how all of those different components are interconnected. And so, one of the things that I think that as you're looking at different schools, you really want to consider, and I think boarding schools do this exceptionally well, is not just access but active participation in wellness. And that's everything from, the conversations that are being had about mental health. Is there stigma? Is there not only access, but active participation in the in conversations with mental health professionals? If it comes to physical health, right? Are you only going to see the nurse when something goes wrong, or are you engaging in conversations about what you can do preventatively? We're really fortunate in that we have the Aaron Levitas Foundation has funded a full-time position of we call it Director of Health and Wellness, but it's a more substantial title. It's one of those long titles that's really all about how do we give at St. Timothy's our girls, but at any other boarding school, how do we empower our students to take active ownership of their own health and wellness? And what that means is that they've got to really understand it, not just a health class, but an entire culture of health and wellness, right? So that we're engaged in those conversations. So those are really big and important questions that really I want to make sure that every parent asks of every single school that they look at, because those are the kinds of things. I mean, how are you proactive about homesickness? It's going to happen. Right? We know it's going to happen. We've been in this business for some of us, some of our schools are almost 200 years old. And we've been in this business a long time. We know kind of what to expect. Are we being proactive about it? Are we taking preventative measures? How are we considering, all of those different aspects, from the social, the emotional, the spiritual, the mental, all of those different questions. And so, I could speak a lot about what we do at our school, but I want to make sure that you're asking the right questions as you're exploring all the different schools that you look at. But then you also want to consider access, right? Nurses on campus. Some schools are going to have nurse practitioners so that you can navigate that prescription landscape. How are students' meds handled, right? Are they allowed to have them in their rooms? Most schools aren't going to allow you to just, have your own medications around, only because of the temptation and the brain development of a teenager is wired for risk taking. So you want to make sure that you're being mindful of those things. How nearby are those nurses, right? Are they on campus? Are they off campus? Are they on call? We're fortunate in that Johns Hopkins Medical Center is about 10 minutes from here. So that's really nice. So we're on, 145 acres in a rural setting, but if something goes crazy, we've got the very best in the business right down the road. And I think most schools, right, alluded to not just their proximity to, say, New York City or their proximity to other major metropolitan areas, but those also speak to some of the really important places that you may need to go in the event of something. But a lot of it comes down to prevention and culture and proactivity and active participation. So really making sure that you ask the right questions with regards to all of it, as opposed to just, do you have a registered nurse? There's much more.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesse, for that. We have two more topics that we'd love to touch on. One, JP, if you could address athletic recruiting and how that process takes place within boarding school.
Sure. Yeah, it's as we've said in many of these questions, every school is going to be a little bit different. Every school has a program or two or three that, recruit at a, maybe even at a college level. And so what happens at a lot of schools is the admissions office and the coaching staff work hand in hand with each other in introducing student athletes, either from the coach to the admission side or from the admission side to the coach. So if you're on this call and you're a student athlete, you are going to be talking to coaches at these schools, and that should be a priority for you. If you know, as Laura talked about, if you are a star soccer player in your mind, and you play on clubs, and you're on a travel program, you know, those are things that, you know, if you find a school that's the right fit for you, you want to introduce yourself to the soccer coach. So that's one way of going about it. The other way is obviously, you know, tournaments and different showcases that in a normal summer would have been going on. And maybe in some of the states out there and internationally, they still are. But that's another great opportunity to meet coaches and tell them about yourselves. In admissions and in coaching, you know, at least are the policies that are in place. The students really should be approaching the coaches. This isn't like a, you know, the Major League Baseball where they see you in the sand lot and they come up to you and, you know, hand you a check or something like that. It's a different process. This is an admissions process. And so we need to be working hand in hand in that. But again, as we've said with everything, be in touch with the admission staff, be in touch with the coaching staff, and show them your interest in the school, but also in whatever program it might be. And I would also say that's the same thing for if you're a star artist or musician. The special interests faculty at our schools want to hear from you, because if you are a virtuoso violinist, our, you know, orchestra at a school or the music director, he or she is gonna push for you in the admissions process. So those are all things that I think kind of go hand in hand with recruiting in general.
Great, thank you, JP. And then the one last topic we wanted to cover before we do our wrap up and discussion about the fair that's coming up is about international applicants. And so Laura, can you address that?
I can. So most schools are going to have an international student population, and we feel that providing an international experience for all students is valuable, and hopefully the international students who are coming to our schools are having an international experience too, not just an American experience, but getting to know other students from all around the world and other cultures besides either their own or America. So it's a part of the process that we take pretty seriously. We know that many international students already speak English very well and would not really need to demonstrate proficiency. But in a lot of cases, you know, especially English is oftentimes a student's second, third, fourth language. So we would love to know, we just want to be confident that the student is a good fit for our academic program and going to be able to navigate successfully. So we usually do ask for some type of language proficiency. In many cases, it's the TOEFL. But this year, I know because circumstances are being what they are, many schools are offering and expanding into different types of English proficiency testing. For example, the Duolingo is one. It's an internet-based test that you can take at home. So the test is one piece. Interviews are often done on virtually anyway, so that's something that is not too different for international students applying to U.S. schools this year. And we'll want to know when we're talking to international students, we like to try to get a sense in the interview not only of academic proficiency, but also just, will you fit in with the students that we have? Can we see you making friends? Do we think this is going to be a good fit for you? Are you going to settle in comfortably here? So we're looking at factors like that, and that's something that we're trying to get a sense of, and that's something that we're trying to give you a sense of as well, so that international students can make that determination as well. It's a great idea for international families to ask what specific support services a school will offer just for international students. Not just what we offer all students, but specifically what do we offer you as an international student. little things like airport transportation, possibly a homestay if needed, something like that, all the way up to things like cultural opportunities to share culture with others, and opportunity to learn and have that sort of intercultural education as well. And then there are other specific things that we do, that all schools will do to help international students pertaining to visas. And I think that is what, I think there's somebody else who's going to handle that aspect of things, if I'm correct.
Thank you. Nurk, do you have anything to add about visas?
Yeah, just a couple comments. I know that this summer has been a little bit hectic for a lot of our international students. There's been a lot of guidance that's been coming back and forth, changing at the federal level. I guess just a couple comments. Please be in touch with, for the international students, please be in touch with your designated school officials. I'm not sure if it's the folks in the dean's office, but every school usually has some sort of school official who handles the international students. Be in touch with them. Make sure your I-20 form is up to date. Your CVIS fee is paid. As a consular officer, when an international student comes in for a visa, that's usually one of the first couple things that we check. If you have any questions, ask your designated school official first, but then you can always email the consulate directly or the embassy. I'm not sure how wide-ranging our students are, or the participants on this webinar. But we're always here to help. One of the things that the State Department prioritizes is the international students, and we usually try to move those interviews up, especially if there is a situation where the student needs to get to the school sooner than later to meet the deadline for whether it's quarantine or classes are going to be starting up. We are always happy to help. For those folks who are in Bermuda, you can always reach out to us at hamiltonconsulate@state.gov. We're more than happy to take your questions and be of any kind of assistance. So that's all I got.
Great, thank you so much for that. So at this point, we are gonna just give some wrap up for the evening. First of all, thank you to all the panelists and all your expertise that you shared. We really, really appreciate it. I know this is a crazy busy time of year for y'all, getting acclimated to being back on campus and, you know, starting the school year. So we really appreciate y'all taking the time to share with the, hopefully, prospective applicants to your schools. Something about, you know, the fair, I just wanted to let everyone know that, so on Thursday, September 24th, as well as Thursday, October 1st from 5:30 to 8. And then on Saturday, September 26th and Saturday, October 3rd, both from 10 a.m. to 12:30. And sorry, these are in Eastern time. We are going to do the fairs. And so the schools have been split up amongst those dates. You can have access to their Zoom rooms on our website, which is boardingschool360.com. You are welcome to just pop on at the 15 minutes, you know, on the hour, and then the 15 minutes after that, we'll have either individual or small groups, just depending on who's in the rotation. We've tried to also group for the participants, the girls' schools to be together, the boys' schools to be together, and then the junior boarding schools to be together, and then the co-ed kind of high schools are all kind of sprinkled throughout. So, so if there's something in particular that you're looking for your school experience, you can have all your schools grouped together. And like I said, those links to the Zoom room are located on the website, so you don't have to register in advance. Like I said, it's really meant to be casual and informative, so no one needs to prepare for anything. You don't have to dress a certain way. This is really a great opportunity just to get to learn more about the schools and their programs in a condensed period of time. And then obviously, if you guys have any questions about anything, you can always reach out to Kelly or myself, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
And Katie, I just put in the question, the Q&A, and I think it ended up in the answers, but someone asked for the website, so I put it in the answers. You can find it there. I also put it in the chat, but as Katie said, it is boardingschool360.com, and you can go in on all those days. But thank you all. Thank you to our attendees, to our families, but our panelists, they were awesome.
Very impressive. So thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great evening. And again, if there's any questions or comments or concerns that any of y'all have, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to do whatever I can to help you in your process. And thank you to all the panelists. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have a good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.